Welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. This is episode 45 for the third time. Hopefully, this is successful. We have been having some issues because it appears that last time I had was an upgrade or whatever they call these things. There was formats changed on my settings. There was some and it kind of like definitely didn't allow us to have people on, and also didn't allow for us to replay the video. So anyway, that was very frustrating. We did it twice last night, neither of which was recorded. It was very frustrating, and it was a really great show. It was the end of the episode with the loss of 2D design and the ramifications of that. So it was very, very frustrating because I think we did it twice very, very well. And it was a shame that both ended up in disaster. And no one saw it and no one got a chance to replay it. So I did a test this morning and I kind of like saw that I had to change some of the settings. I reset them again because it seems like they defaulted back to the other ones. And hopefully this will work because everything is set properly. It's very frustrating because, you kind of rely on these things and you kind of get to a certain point. And again, what's really nice is we're getting some really nice feedback from some people who are actually looking at the programs and enjoying the programs, which makes me very happy. But then, stupid things like this become absolutely very frustrating. It's really kind of like annoying. Anyway, Julie and I decided that since it is still technically her birthday and will be for another hour and 10 minutes, that as long as we finish it, that it will basically be considered her birthday, because we waited to do this on her birthday to finish this particular set of Loss of 2D Design. Anyway, as is my common now, I'm going to read a piece from a piece that's been very influential in my life, and this piece is from Jorge Luis Borges' collected fictions. It's called The Witness. Let's see what piece, what collection was that from? Okay, this page. Okay, let's see. It's from The Maker, published 1960. So anyway, here it is. This is 2 paragraphs, literally only 2 paragraphs, some of the most powerful writing I've ever read. In the stable that stands almost in the shadow of the Noonstone church, a man with gray eyes and gray beard, lying amid the odor of the animals, humbly tries to will himself into death, much as the man might will himself to sleep. The day, obedient to vast and secret laws, slowly shifts around and mingles the shadows in the lowly place. Outside lie plied fields, a ditch clogged with dead leaves, and the faint tracks of a wolf in a black clay, where the line of the woods begins. The man sleeps in dreams, forgotten. The bells for horizons awaken him. Bells are now one of evening's customs in the kingdom of England. But as a boy, the man has seen the face of Woden, the sacred horror and the exaltation, the clumsy wooden idol laden with Roman coins and ponderous vestments, the sacrifice of horses, dogs, and prisoners. Before dawn, he will be dead, and with him, the last eyewitness images of pagan rites will perish, never to be seen again. The world will be a little poorer when the Saxon man is dead. Things, events that occupy space yet come to an end when someone dies may make us stop in wonder. And yet one thing, or an infinite number of things, dies with every man or woman's death, unless the universe itself has a memory, as Theosophists have suggested. In the course of time, there was one day that closed the last eyes that had looked upon Christ. The battle of Jenin and the love of Helen died with the death of one man. What will die with me the day I die? What pathetic or frail image will be lost to the world? The voice of Macedonio Fernandez, the image of a bay horse in a vacant lot, on the corner of Serrano and Charkis. Don't know if I'm saying Charkis, it might be wrong. A bar of sulfur in the drawer of a mahogany desk. So the brilliance about this is the fact that one understands the fact that, for me, the things that are important are the idea that these things that pass through life, that you find that are meaning in your life, can come to be meaningful or come to be nothing. But the reality is they are yours and they do have some kind of consequence. But with you, they end. And in this case, there's always the possibility that one may think that, it's kind of a testament to those people who desire to kind of put meaning in their lives. But in this case, the reason I use it is because what's happening is there is something of significance that passes away before our eyes and leaves us in a state lower than the one we had prior to its loss. To me, the thing that's significant about 2D design is the fact that it's a basic fundamental organizational format. 3D design and all the other forms with which Western art and the idiom of Western art comes basically can be reduced to these simple formats of 2D design. Painting, sculpture, architecture, printmaking, film, all basically can be reduced to the same principles of kind of composition, of color, of type, of symbolism, of language, of figure and ground. All these things are inherent in the nature of 2D design. And with the loss of that, we are poorer. Now, what's going to happen is Julie's going to basically kind of help us understand some of the technical aspects and some of the important aspects, as well as some of the historical aspects. And we're going to get into that. But first, we're going to basically look at Julie's painting from yesterday, and we're going to talk on that. Yes, that's true drawing. Okay, all right, so.
Sorry, I got here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, hello.
Happy birthday, Julie.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Third time's the charm. That's
Hopefully.
What they always say. So, what you are looking at is a lettuce sea slug, two different species. One here and the other one here as yet to be fully manifested. This one I quite manifested in its entirety on Friday at the Met. What is key here is I've chosen a nécessaire from the British wing, still on view, of gold and enamel. And a nécessaire, for those of you who do not know, they were used from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, really up through the 19th century, when women had no pockets and the well-heeled traveler needed to carry those necessary tools or implements for survival, for life on the road, for life on a sea voyage. Even just kind of going in the carriage was a really rather big thing. There were no drugstores or convenience stores. So a nécessaire has all the tools that one would need. Tweezers, scissors, knives, writing implements, even small rolls of parchment paper, drafting tools, often ink and inkwells, almost always sewing equipment. Now, what is key is the nécessaire is a great metaphor for the necessity, the orthogenetic change that occurred in this amazing animal, which is the only animal that can photosynthesize like a plant. So the lettuce sea slug actively steals the
chloroplast.
Thank you. I'm really tired. Steals the chloroplast from the algae that would be one of its main food sources, and it's sort of omnipresent environmental neighbor. And it doesn't just eat the algae; it gathers, collects, holds, and cultivates the stolen chloroplasts, which have been renamed kleptoplasts, as in stolen chloroplasts, and has developed a specialized organ called a kleptosome in which to keep these chloroplasts for weeks or even months, amazingly. So it turns sunlight into carbohydrates or simple sugars, exactly like a plant does. And all it needs to survive is the sun, given its rapid evolution. So that's what my drawing is about. And the veins in the leaf-like structures of this animal are literally absorbing the tools that morph with the venation, the circulatory system of the lettuce sea slug. And you can see the enamel and the gold of the necessaire, which were very compact and a whole bunch of tools, 8, 9, 10 tiny, beautifully formed tools would fit into a very small, beautifully crafted case with, interestingly, one compartment for each tool. And this is another metaphor. There is a specialized, if you will, compartment for the storage of the kleptoplasts, because there's nowhere else they could be stored, and then they would simply be eaten, consumed, and excreted. But that is not the case. They are an internal lantern. It's a nice idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll see that next week. You'll be working on that. It looks pretty. We're close to finished. I mean, I think that the idea of this the sea slug kind of impregnating itself on the surface of the necessaire is quite clear, and then its ability to kind of absorb through its own kind of like system, its own process, these pieces that are kind of staged as a kind of like analogies as part of the metaphor, and in this particular metaphor of absorbing these things into itself as being its self-sufficiency.
Yeah, and very, very excitingly, just a quick thing, this circle that you can see in the upper right corner is slated for something very exciting, a reference that I found that was very hard to find, which is an actual scanning electron micrograph of the kleptosome with the kleptoplasts in it. It's brilliant, and interestingly looks like the cells of a beehive. And I don't think that is by chance. When something works beautifully in nature, a structure or function, it is oft repeated. Yes.
Look forward to seeing the conclusion.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess, now, I guess to recap, we started talking about this. We talked about the essential nature of 2D design. We talked about kind of the way in which type had been attacked. We talk away about the simple understandings had been kind of like erased, and even in places like some of the institutions that were very, very much at the center of this type of work, the technical proficiencies and technical capabilities had eroded to the point where they were basically inconsequential. So we basically got rid of something that was essential. And though we can blame, say, the digitization of type is not responsible for the demise of the two-dimensional reality. I don't believe.
Yeah, I'll say what I feel
is.
though.
Absolutely.
The publishing companies who employed real, and I use this word very specifically, real graphic designers with actual training in color theory, composition, photo editing, painting, drawing, writing. These were essential skills. And the reason is, and I brought this up in our other two. It's okay. Why don't you plug it in? Probably have to plug it in. Anyway, a real, authentic, well-trained graphic designer with a world of experience is the conductor of a symphony playing a classical piece. A conductor has to know how all of the instruments work and how the instruments sound. They have to know the structure of the piece, the composition, the narrative. So, as a designer in several top flight major art coffee table book and then later premium trade children's book publishing houses, I was in charge of the entire book. I art directed the book. I chose the fabric that bound the book, the head and tail bands. I very often I created the art for the end papers of the book. These things were not prefabricated or pre-made as they are now, where you can go on the computer and you have a narrow preordained choice of a palette, and you just click a button and the computer makes all these choices. I mean, you have people using artificial intelligence to write their scientific papers, and not just a few people. And letting you all know, artificial intelligence can be very, very unintelligent. It is not a metaphorical thinker. It is not a substitute for circular thought. It is not even a linear thinker. It just knows what was fed into it. And it will choose the most popular thing. It will basically it will take a consensus of the information. I mean, it will do a search and present all the information with equal weight. And this is a very key point. A real human, a cultivated, highly trained, very experienced two-dimensional designer can draw, can paint, can write. I did not find that everything had equal weight. There are thousands and thousands of choices one needs to make regarding front matter, back matter, table of contents, decorative elements, what the narrative and the theme of the book is. Meaning, I had to read every book I designed, whether it was 420 pages or 200. You had to understand the subject matter. The idea is you are the conductor of the narrative and the content and the manifester of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the things that we realized, we were kind of listening to a YouTube video by this interesting person who seems to be in the opera world, and she talked about the fact that right now, there are these
opera's really ugly.
Opera is very ugly,
yeah.
And the reality part of it is the fact that the composer's gone, the librettist is gone, and a lot of the people who actually kind of created the piece are gone, leaving only the director to basically decide how to manifest the legacy of this piece. Some people are respectful, some people are not. And the unfortunate reality is there isn't the composer to be able to look at this and say, this is not what I had intention. This is horrible.
Yeah.
So the director, kind of like, who was a minor character, is now basically the sole proprietor of this work. And one of the things that's happening is like these are kind of becoming these really ugly, disastrous things that, in fact, the opera world is kind of baiting people like us with, and saying like, oh, here, Traviata. It's like, oh, Traviata, oh, that's great. And you're like, why in that gas station? Where was there a gas station?
A gas station in Kansas
like,
in the 1980s.
What the fuck is this? And then, like, what was the one we saw? It was in the Portland train station.
God, La Forza del Destino, set in a homeless shelter.
Oh my
in
God!
Portland.
And it wasn't also like in a military camp.
It was in a military prison.
It was just so.
It was ugly. It was.
And the other thing is, exactly. And in fact, the scene at the end with the
where she's supposed to be killed.
Right, the last scene, which is so incredibly identifiable, couldn't be staged because it was impossible. So it's like, oh wait, I think someone's been stabbed. Oh wait, they're dying. Oh my God, look what happened. And it's like, it was just horrible.
And the lack of props, and I will take this right back to two-dimensional design. When the people, if there even are any people left doing it, do not know what they're doing. They're incredibly incompetent. I see what they are turning out. I mean, you have one book after the other where the text slides into the gutter, and the gutter is the center where the spine is. You can't read a text where at least half of every word at the end of every sentence
is lost.
in the gutter. You choose the margins. So things like proportion. I mean, these people don't know anything about it, where you can't even find a folio on a page or a header or footer. You don't even know what chapter you are in. They do not know how to come up with a design for stand-up caps or drop caps, which are an elegant way to start every chapter. So most of the chapters I see now start with regular text, with nothing about them that's special or discerning. It destroys the content and the narrative of the book. And a book, say, like The Life of the White Ant by Maeterlinck, is handled just like a play by Shakespeare or a Stephen King throwaway piece of junk that you'd see in an airport. They're all designed the same. Now, this is an abomination. You have things that are utterly different. A real competent graphic artist knows how to manifest the content and the narrative of the project in every page, with the chapter titles, with the index, with the table of contents. The opening of a book should be like the opening of a great play, a great opera, a great film. You have images. You understand how the pictures fall in the text. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of choices that are not only not being made, that are not even understood.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's another thing is that,
Yeah.
I mean, because Julie is an alumni at Cooper, we
I
go
am.
back, usually for the end of the year
Yes,
show.
we do.
And, I'd been going since I was in architectural school, and I used to always visit because I had a tremendous admiration and respect for Cooper. So I would always go and see and look at the fact that, for me, what was really important about Cooper was not the fact that they were kind of like, brilliant professors who were kind of like, kind of creating brilliant students. The students were already brilliant. They were brilliant before they got there. And, it's not that the professors lacked character or ability either. But what was really important was students were enlisted to understand the legacy of the techniques and the idioms that had gotten us to where we were. So the idea was understanding printmaking, understanding painting, understanding lithographs, understanding the way in which things had been done and the history and the evolution of how things were done.
Yes.
So there was, what was it? The art of the book.
Yeah.
The art of the book just seemed like the quintessential project that any graphic artist, graphic designer should basically take to understand the nature of the craft, and the fact that, like, you are generating an incredibly unique thing that is basically a kind of like time capsule of this entire circumstance.
And very importantly, on that note, I'm glad that you brought that up. The art of the book class, which I elected to actually take 3 separate times because it had such a value, taught us that typography is pictographic. And this is a very important idea that is all but extinct now. These are not ugly little strokes that don't mean anything. To understand, we drew our own typefaces by hand. I was trained that way. I was trained as a calligrapher, ironically not as a painter. I am a science painter and science writer, but I was trained as a calligrapher, both in Chinese and medieval script. And the key thing is these are all pictographic forms which originated in images that were transcribed to become type
Mhm.
and typographic symbols.
Mhm.
There are people now who have no idea that a computer that was
Mm.
fed a typeface is using the punctuation from 20 different faces for all of the faces. You would never do that. Every typeface
Mm.
had its own numbers, its own small caps. It and this is really, really, really key. Bold face text is not the computer making Roman text fat, but that's what the computer does. Italic text is not the computer slanting Roman type, but that's what the computer does. These were entirely different, hand drawn, intimately, subtly, beautifully scripted and considered. Every ascender, meaning something like a B, or a descender, meaning the tail on a G or a lowercase p, was considered. What was the thickness? How long would it go? Where would the crossbar be?
Mm.
What were the proportions? These were adjusted
Mm.
by people with the knowledge to adjust them incredibly aesthetically perfectly.
And in fact, one of the
Yeah.
things that you also talked about
Yeah.
was the idea of ligatures.
Oh, yes.
And in fact, that what
Please.
happened was, because I had not known what a ligature was, but when you explained to me the concept,
It's
it
really
basically
important.
was the case where certain configurations of letters created certain opportunities for the artist to express themselves.
Mhm.
But rather than that, now basically it had been eliminated. So in the case where you had like two T's and an L, or two T's and an E, or like, something like that, you had the opportunity, given the face, to see the legacies of what people had done in these particular configurations, and what the possibility was for innovation,
Mhm.
and new ideas of how to to kind of create your own ligatures. But in this case, ligatures could no longer exist, because they've all been basically, you don't have that control over the type.
Right, you're absolutely right. And what do we have in its stead? An abomination of a tangle of letter forms.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to read anything that is typeset now by monkeys, you will find tangles of letters that don't read well. And there is something called a beautiful gray, where you have type that doesn't have splotchy, tangled areas. It doesn't have gaping, missing teeth.
Mm.
It 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 doesn't have what you'll see often, where a type is justified, meaning it is aligned on the left and aligned on the right, like columns in a newspaper.
Mm.
Now that's fine, because they print them every day, and
Mhm.
they can't
Sorry.
spend what?
Sorry.
Sure. And they can't spend that amount of time fine tuning type for kind of a throwaway thing.
Right.
They used to, but they can't.
Mm-hmm.
So you will have 8 words jammed into a sentence with no spaces between
Mm.
the words, almost impossible to read.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have flush left, rag right, which is what many people choose, you have a beautiful shape and a pattern, but a designer knows about that. And there is something called stacking, which is all gone by the wayside, which I didn't mention, where you have multiple word breaks stacked on top of each other. You never want that, meaning hyphen, 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 or say the word the. It's poor form, like working out at the gym and slamming the weights. It's called poor form. You would not have a stack. You would manipulate the line breaks for a beautiful rag. These are things that are aesthetically vital, not just for the art of the design, but for comprehension of the subject.
Yeah, because I mean, not
Yeah.
only did Gutenberg, when he invented the
The
printing
Gutenberg,
press,
yeah,
Gutenberg Bible,
yeah.
not only did that kind of it, I'm sure there were people complained about the fact that some of the craftsmanship and some of the great beauty was taken out by now, kind of like making this innovation.
I'm sure.
But at the same time, there was a benefit. The benefit was the mass extension of information to a greater audience.
Mhm.
So now the idea of more people had the ability to kind of have accessible knowledge, had access to knowledge. Now, in the case of digitizing type, there might have been the fact that there is a benefit in the fact that the digitizing of type may have led to the fact that there now are more places and more possibilities to kind of like, generate your own work, and that it is probably more accessible through certain places to do a vanity press or do kind of self-publishing. But at the same time, it didn't need to be at the expense of the idiom. And I think that's the
or
piece.
the comprehension,
Right,
or
exactly.
the content.
So I
or
think
the
that to me
narrative.
is the tragedy, is the
Yeah.
fact that like the sacrifice of a certain kind of like monkish dedication to the craft prior to like Gutenberg's time, to the point where now you had things that could be done relatively quickly using the press to make books accessible to a greater audience, which spread knowledge.
Oh, yeah, that's a great
That was
thing.
a great achievement. So that was a trade-off that one can basically argue. The trade-off we did. The trade-off we have now doesn't seem necessary.
No.
There was no reason to kind of like mess with the idioms. And, that's the thing that I think is also troubling.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think Bruce makes a really excellent point. I'm going to draw a direct connection to a loss of time and place. And this applies to two-dimensional design and to opera and to theater. And I'm going to draw this analogy in a very lucid way. When you are forced to see Lucia di Lammermoor, and she's like, a car hop in the 1950s in the Midwest, there is no tragedy, and there's plenty of tragedy in there. And you have no props, so you don't have a setting. I mean, we saw what was a really decent production of Don Giovanni only because the opera singers, and I would like to single out the phenomenal Swedish baritone Peter Mattei, who made that production. But the set, for all of its cleverness, looked like something in Orwell's 1984 on a budget, a low budget. There was none of the flavor, none of the character. I mean, it just was absurd.
Yeah.
So when I see a book now, in fact, I picked up a book at the Strand. I am very excited. Every time I see a collection of Hans Christian Andersen or Grimm's fairy tales, I pick it up. I open up the book. It could have been a report from the DMV.
Well,
it had no character. It had no sense of time and place. A fairy tale is a gnarled, enchanted forest. It's shape-shifting. It's magic. It's silk and brocade. It's talking mushrooms. There was no magic there. It was the most sterile, puerile thing with no sense of what the book was.
Well, I mean, we know the example of, Robert Hooke's Micrographia.
Oh, yes.
I mean,
please tell the story.
I had always wanted
important.
to get a copy of Micrographia because I just felt I had seen copies of it in libraries and things like that, and I always thought it was beautiful.
It is.
And when I got to the point where I had some money, I thought to myself, I can't buy art, but I can always buy beautiful books. So I felt to myself, I wanted to get a good edition of this, and I went online, and Julie's like, "You're making a mistake." And of course, being a male, I just kind of said, like, I never make mistakes. Exactly. I don't need directions.
It was very impatient.
Exactly. Right.
And
so
I said,
anyway,
I will find one.
Right. So it was either Abe or Libris. And again, I'm not going to, the problem is not Abe or Libris.
The
problem was me.
Yeah.
What happened was I ordered the book. I was so excited. I opened it up and I was like, what the fuck is this? And I realized what had happened was it wasn't cheap. Yeah. it was a print on demand. I think you called it.
Yeah. It was print on demand from India.
If you don't know the book, let me explain.
Yeah.
Micrographia was the first time in which we had the ability to see the microscopic world. So these images that we saw for the first time were now being conveyed in these beautiful fold-out illustrations. So the whole idea was an entire new world had been opened up to us. And this book was basically the repository of that reality. However, because of print on demand, there were no pictures.
It
so
was
what they
like
did,
Xeroxes,
right?
just
So it was a
stapled
Xerox.
together.
It was a Xerox of the text, and there were no images. And what they did was, I guess, to be clever, which turned out to just look retarded, was they took the the illustrations and made them into little dingbats, which
Yeah,
are like little
and
symbols,
chopped them up.
and made them just into little symbols that they put on like the
It was-
headings of the
It was
chapters.
It was
It was
gruesome.
so like
It was
saddening. It was
devastating.
devastating.
It
Exactly.
was.
Years later, Julie got me a copy of Micrographia, and I just remember
With gatefolds,
with
which is what
beautiful
what it's
gatefold
supposed to
illustrations,
have.
and I was so in love with that book. It's still one of my most prized possessions. Anyway, an example of how we understood this was Julie had a similar circumstance where she had been doing work on Darwin's books. He had a kind of series of
16
giant folios
books, like encyclopedias.
right, on the barnacle, but they were really poorly illustrated. Now, what we understood is that the idea of transcription, which exists in music and in art and in literature, is
And
where
in science.
right, and in science is where somebody takes something in order to kind of bring this thing to a new audience. So in this case, the idea was Julie saw this text that had no illustrations and had these poor illustrations that were
Giant
useless.
lists of Latin names of barnacles.
So Julie decided to kind of do what we called the Barnacle Codex, and basically take the images and generate the images and let that be the way in which the piece should now be understood. So the Barnacle Codex is the transcription of Darwin's notes into a series of illustrations. And the reason why that was done was we felt, as we were moving into our interdisciplinary realm, that this would be a great place to kind of create these things to give people access to illustrations of the systems, of the operations, of the morphology, the physiology, and all the basic components. Right. I mean, some of these plates have been published in other places and around, like
one
Natural
of our
History
plates
magazine
on
and
on the Complemental Mail was published in the American Museum of Natural History's flagship magazine when they used to do that, a big glossy color as their end paper.
But but to illustrate the idea that this book was made for a specific intention, which was not just to make money or because I don't know if we'll ever make a dime off it, we even finish it. But the point was, this is something that we felt needed to be transcribed into a new format, so it basically could appeal to an audience that was ready to appreciate it.
And didn't know anything about this.
Correct.
This was a revelation. To
which
people.
is really what books and art and music and theater should be, is the fact that, like, let us convey to you a story that is compelling. Let us convey to you an image that is compelling. Let us convey to you a kind of an operation that is compelling, so that we see the significance and can understand the continued appreciation of beauty, of love, and of truth, which is at the center of the Western idiom in terms of art and genius.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, back to your, because I mean, I'm taking up too much time here.
It's okay. So let's speak about color theory, and this is really key. We used to use something called the Pantone matching system, also known as PMS, which obviously a man was involved and a woman was not, because you would never call it that, kind of like Physics Bowl and the Big Bang Theory, their team name. It was a book with a series of tear-out squares of thousands of different colors, all achievable on a printing press. Now, what is key is the vanishing, the veritable extinction of real printers, and that was a huge problem. I think there are very few printers left. People churn stuff out on their computers from computer printers, and the color is abominable. It's also meaningless. What people don't get is every time you have a color in a different format, it changes dramatically. So if you paint a color, then you photograph it on an iPhone, then you load that photo on a computer screen. It has changed 3 times and not just a little. And then you print that computer screen image out and you call it a poster, you call it a menu, you call it a book, you call it a corporate annual report. It will look nothing like the color you started out with, guaranteed.
Mhm.
And when I was a designer, I would do something called going on press. I spent a lot of time at the printer
Mm.
checking it, doing what was called a color check. Every single image in a book, in books that had 300 or 400 images. And when I look at how an image is printed now, like I said in our videos that didn't tape, I saw this great book at the Strand, a monograph on one of our favorite classic painters, Velázquez. I got, really, really excited, opened it up, and now I'm familiar with his work because I've seen a lot of these works in person. The color was atrocious. Obviously, no one ever went on press. No one color checked anything. Everything was jaundiced. Everything had a yellow cast, like somebody had spilled, hot dog stadium mustard on the pieces. They were thin, they were flat, and even worse, they were all printed off register. And for those of us who don't know what that means, when you had a 4-color process or 6-color process, if you added things like a metallic, those were extra. You had the yellow, the magenta, the cyan, and the black. They had to align with each other. And there were registration marks. And you check that, because if you didn't check that, you would end up with blurry pictures with a frame of cyan hanging out one side and magenta hanging off the top and the yellow. They were atrocious. So things like depth of field, or if something was printed way too light, you would have what's called a burnout in a highlight, where you can actually see it now in your beard. Look, on the line. You just, here, I'll hold up the phone again. You are losing all of the detail of the pattern of Bruce's hair follicles and his chin anatomy, because there is a bright light from his phone shining on his face. The same thing happens when you have these incredibly bright parts. It doesn't mean that there's no detail in the highlights. It means it's been dropped, that it's been burnt out, that it's too light. You have to make sure that the details are, and that the detail is in the shadows, and that they are not just flat, muddy parts of the art or the image where you expect to see forms and textures and there aren't any. So I will open up a book now and I see page after page of muddy squares of things that don't read. It's kind of like when some idiot thought that it was a great idea to colorize black and white films, classic films. These films were never meant to be seen in color. They were designed beautifully, art directed beautifully, written beautifully, for color to read as certain shades of gray. It was never meant to be seen in color. Things were chosen because they sparkled, because they gleamed, because they had certain textures or patterns. Same thing. We chose things for those reasons too. Would you like to?
Yeah, I think, for me, this whole experience is the fact that, the basic organization of information on the page is about as fundamental to all the other pieces that come. I mean, I would say that order is a kind of like a forced structure on something.
Yeah.
Whereas organization is a kind of like voluntary configuration. But the voluntary configuration is made because there's a sense of something compelling based on the nature of what it is you're trying to promote, what the character of the piece is. So I think what happens is now people have lost the craft. And as a result, my concern, my ultimate concern is people don't see what they no longer what's no people are not aware of what's been lost.
No, they have
They
no
don't
idea.
see it. I remember taking, and I said this in one of the previous mesh, kind of like iterations of this third attempt to do,
It
episode
better
45,
be taping.
is that I took a graphic design course as an architect, and all it taught me was I have no place in this realm because it's actually very sophisticated and very complicated.
You're doing it correctly.
Exactly.
Well,
and
yeah.
I so the thing is, when I met Julie, I understood the incredible inherent complexity of this, but I also understood, most important, just the same way that drawing is the foundation of all the visual arts, 2D design is the foundation of all the arts as well, because all the things that have to do with composition and symmetry and color and
form,
form
light,
and
shadow,
organization
texture,
all start in this idiom,
Yeah, they
2D,
do.
before they get advanced to 3D. But it's the same principles, and if you
Yes,
don't
it is.
understand the principles, you're lost.
And that's why painting now sucks. 'Cause
Well,
these people have no skill as a
for other
designer.
reasons too. But
Well,
the point
yeah,
is, it's kind of like if you see a chessboard and just see the chess pieces and you know nothing about the game, you don't understand what you're looking at. You're looking at something, you might as well be a monkey looking at the moon.
Yeah.
You have no understanding of
Or trying
Bobby
to write
Fischer or
Kafka.
Boris Spassky
Yeah.
or kind of like Magnus Carlsen or any of these great geniuses that have basically put the legacy of the genius into the game of chess. It's kind of like, we always remember when they started doing subtitles and super titles at the opera.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, if you don't know the story, don't come here, right? I mean, you have every right to do as you wish. But the point is, the people who know the work aren't going there to learn what Carmen is about. They're going there to see this particular performance because this particular person is in this role. Or this, exactly.
Yeah.
So the idea was to basically compare this performance to other performances and understand it within the legacy of the story itself. So, it's like, it's great for people to go and learn and say, oh my God, what a great story. I need to learn more about opera, which is how I came in. But the point is, like, at a certain point, you realize there needs to be a necessity of understanding what it's about. And that's my fear, is that we've lost this. Because again, like I said, I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know what I don't see, what's gone forever and I can't bring it back. Julie does, much greater than anyone else. But the thing is, with the end of this generation, and I guess your generation was the one that came out, like, I guess in like the mid 80s.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
And again, it just, something really fundamental has been lost.
Well, yeah, and what it has been replaced by is not only not adequate, it's an abomination of what was, and the information that was communicated is being sullied to the point where it's not even understood. I mean, I'll bring up something else. The inability of most people in these last generations to write, handwriting, to write in cursive script. There is generation after generation that has no idea how to write things by hand, as absurd as that sounds. And there were several really key studies in Japan. This feeds right into what is being lost, is that with the inability to write your thoughts in longhand, hand, pen, pencil on paper, you don't remember anything. Meaning the act of writing is also the act of cognition. It's the act of thinking and the act of reasoning in real time. And without that ability, they remembered nothing. So all of these, kids in college now can't write. I mean, they really cannot write. And they are typing things they're mostly copying or plagiarizing things, actually, which is going to bring us to a future episode on artifice and imitation. And they retain nothing. Now, here is the bigger problem. When you retain nothing, you cannot build foundationally on these concepts. So nothing is being advanced or created or progressed. And all they're doing is simply copying and presenting it as done. It's not even theirs. And they don't understand it. They don't know it. They haven't absorbed
That's
it.
interesting. Yeah, I remember when you told me
Yeah.
that. I remember we
Yeah.
had talked about the fact I was reading a book that Darwin had written about, expressions.
Oh, that's a
and
fascinating
and I remember you saying
I
that
found that for
you
you.
did that women who had, or people, it doesn't have to be
Plastic
women,
surgery.
had
men,
plastic
women,
surgery, could not
mirror.
could not mirror emotions.
Yeah,
So they lost the ability for a certain emotional resonance.
meaning they can't
They
act
couldn't
or
act.
play a
Exactly.
role
So they
with
exactly.
anybody.
So the point was the same way that your expressions are a result of certain desires. You can't read them
Yep.
because you can't mirror them.
Mhm.
So you couldn't, you lost your ability to learn how to read faces.
And then you don't feel any of
Exactly. So you
Either.
it seems like it's kind of recipe for kind of, I mean, again, these
Yeah.
are emotionally frail people
Yes.
who are basically vanity cases. So now what you're doing is you're kind of like taking away their ability to understand the little bit that they understood
did.
before. So now they become complete narcissistic sociopaths.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. So anyway, we're into the last 10 minutes. So let's wrap it up. And then finally, we'll kind of be able to kind of put this out there and we'll be very happy.
That'll be really
What
great.
we're going to do next week, I think, is we're going to return to, drawing and copying. So it kind of follows on this idea of the difference between expressing an essence and character or simply kind of like creating a resemblance.
Well, yes. I mean, when one was in the studio of a great master, one used to imitate their work or copy their work, and often the very busy studios of Rembrandt or Velasquez, a lot of the Dutch Vanitas, painters couldn't paint fast enough to keep up with the demand at the time, and they did have a lot of assistants who painted works like theirs, or they would start a work, they would finish a work, they would do the important parts, and an assistant did. But this was very, very different because there was a learning process going on. Anyway, we shouldn't
but also
get into
technique
followed
the ability to express the essence of something, not simply to create a resemblance. So anyway, final thoughts from my loved one.
Yes, that when you are navigating your place in the world and through the world, those creatures, those entities that guide you are printed materials. They are as important in a milestone fashion. These are the totems of your cartography. And we don't have those totems anymore. We have a cartographic map that doesn't function as a map. So, I mean, I see people wandering around all the time trying to figure out not where they're going from a sign, trying to decipher the sign itself. The entire point of signage is to instruct, is to guide, lead, inspire, and yes, I'm going to use this word, comfort. It's very comforting to have a three-dimensional map around you that helps you get where you're going so you don't feel abandoned and lost in your environment. We are all abandoned and lost in an impoverished two-dimensional environment. And that's how I'd like to end it.
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think that's great. So next week we'll be talking about drawing and copying. That'll be on episode 46.
Oh, my
And
sword.
as we say,
Mm.
the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's to benefit all of us to keep it exactly like that.
Amen to
Thank
that.
you. Okay.
Oh, I better have taped.